ISEMED Diagnostic Limited proudly commemorated World Hepatitis Day at the Nigerian Security and Civil Defense Corps, Benue State Command. We received a warm and remarkable welcome as officers across all ranks turned out in large numbers to participate in the event. During the outreach, we delivered an enlightening lecture on viral hepatitis. We emphasized on the importance of awareness, prevention, early detection, and vaccination. In fact, we screened over close to 100 officers and then vaccinated about 50% of them. The session was highly interactive, with officers asking thoughtful questions that were carefully addressed. We are delighted that the participants expressed, great satisfaction with the lecture and appreciated the clarity and practical understanding provided. At ISEMED Diagnostic Limited, we remain committed to promoting health education, early diagnosis, and preventive healthcare for a healthier society. That's what we stand for. That's what we are known for. So, for context, of course, we talked about hepatitis. Let me provide a bit of a context here. So, what is hepatitis essentially? Hepatitis is the inflammation of the liver. That's what we know. An inflammation of the liver. But before then, how prevalent is this hepatitis in Nigeria and in Benue State in particular? The reality of the matter is that over 18 million people in Nigeria are currently living with hepatitis B. And if you spread it, it's like 1 in every 10 person, has hepatitis B in Nigeria. For hepatitis C, I think about 12.5 million people are living with hepatitis C in Nigeria. Now, when you come to Benue State, about 5 to 11 persons in every 100 population or 100 people are living with viral hepatitis B, and about 5 in every 100, persons in every 100, people, population, are living with hepatitis C. That's the reality of the matter. Now, let's go back to the meaning of hepatitis, which I said is the inflammation of the liver. And this inflammation can be central to so many things. It could be as a result of, anthropogenic toxicants. It could be as a result of biological toxicant. Now, when I talk about anthropogenic toxicant, I'm talking about man-made toxicant, man-made, stuff. You talk about chemicals, you talk about alcohol, you talk about heavy metals, you talk about medications, pharmaceuticals, essentially. They can cause liver inflammation. And of course, the biological particles, we are referring to microorganisms, essentially, like your protozoas, like viruses. Over time, when you go to the hospital, we realize that, those that present with hepatitis B or C, there is always a direction of the direction of the type of hepatitis they have. Is always from the biological angle or biological particles, notably viruses. And on that note, let's talk about viral hepatitis. So let's go back to the definition of hepatitis, which is the inflammation of the liver caused by what? Viruses. These viruses can be hepatitis B, or rather, it can be hepatitis A, hepatitis B, hepatitis C, hepatitis D, hepatitis E. So let's start with A. Hepatitis A is an infectious type of hepatitis, and it's the type of hepatitis you get from fecal oral contamination, I mean from dirty environments or during outbreaks, you get hepatitis A. And hepatitis A rarely leads to chronicity. With optimal immune system, it can disappear from the system. And then we talk about hepatitis B. Now, hepatitis B and hepatitis C, they are the two types that lead to chronicity. When we talk about chronicity, we are referring to the persistence of the virus in the system or in the body beyond 6 months. So if the virus has stayed in the system beyond 6 months, we say it is chronic in nature. So hepatitis B and C can lead to chronicity. Now we jumped. Okay, let's go to D. Hepatitis D can only exist in the presence of hepatitis B because they need, the help of hepatitis B for their replication. So you will hardly see hepatitis D alone without hepatitis B. Of course, it can lead to chronicity too, but it exists where there is hepatitis B. And we talk about E finally. E is just like hepatitis A. It's the type of is an infectious hepatitis you get from fecal oral contamination, from dirty environment during outbreaks. That's when you get, that type of hepatitis. Now, hepatitis A and hepatitis E, they can be severe in, especially in immunocompromised individual like children and then elderly. And that is why hepatitis A vaccine is, routinely advised for children, to be taken because, children, they are born with uh, not really functional immune system. So any little thing can actually weigh them down. And in that context, we always advise that they take hepatitis A vaccine. Now, that being said, hepatitis being explained now, let's talk about how can this hepatitis be contracted. The reality of the matter is that the hepatitis virus or hepatitis B and hepatitis C, they can be contained in the body fluids. And when we talk about body fluids, we talk about your blood, we talk about secretions in the body, like vaginal secretions, semen, we talk about saliva, breast milk. But in reality, they occur in an infinitesimal state or amount in saliva and in breast milk. And that is why it is rarely, gotten through that means, through saliva and breast milk, unless there are visible sores or there are wounds. That when um, transmission can occur through breast milk and through saliva, which can come through kissing and all that. But it should be noted that hepatitis B can be contracted through fellatio, and hepatitis B can equally be contracted through cunnilingus. That should be noted, but not hepatitis C. The reality of the matter is that hepatitis B is 50 to 100 times more infectious than HIV. It is 50 to 100 times more infectious than HIV. I mean hepatitis B, and that is why you know you can contract it through secretions. You can get through fellatio or through cunnilingus. All I'm saying is that when you have a contaminated object or objects that has been contaminated with an infected blood, and that blood or that object comes in contact with you, you can get it. This can come through sharps, through razor blades, through a clipper, barbing salon, through unsterilized medical equipment, through sexual intercourse, through mother to child transmission, like if a mother is hepatitis B positive or hepatitis C positive, during birth, if there is a communication between the mother's blood and the baby's blood, hepatitis can be transmitted. But talking about mother to baby transmission, I think it is necessary I say this here, that if a woman, a seropositive woman who is pregnant and about to give birth, or maybe after delivery, if you truly want to protect your child from getting it or your baby from getting it, sorry, I think is to give the baby the first dose of the hepatitis B vaccine. So once the first dose of the hepatitis B vaccine is given to the baby, born by a seropositive mother, breastfeeding can start. You mustn't wait till immunoglobulin, hepatitis B immunoglobulin G is given before breastfeeding can commence. Yes, if you have hepatitis B as a mother after delivery, you can give the baby hepatitis B vaccine first dose and breastfeeding can continue. That should be noted. That being said, about ways in which hepatitis B and C can be contracted, let's talk about how it cannot be contracted. The reality of the matter is that you can't get hepatitis B through hugging. You can't get hepatitis B through using the same utensils. You can't get hepatitis B through using the same toiletries, like the same WCs. You can't get hepatitis B through hugging, like I've said that before. Even mild kissing, hepatitis B, you can contract it through mild kissing. That should be noted, right? So let's talk about, we've talked about ways in which hepatitis B can be contracted. Let's talk about prevention, right? Now, the reality of the matter, before prevention, we'll talk about, yeah, the reality of the matter is that hepatitis B is 100% preventable. You can prevent it. You can prevent hepatitis B. And the only way you can prevent hepatitis B is by taking the vaccine. The vaccine is a preventative measure that is designed to protect you from getting hepatitis B. Now, this vaccine can come, the schedules of the vaccine can come in two folds. It can be the 012 schedules or 015 schedules. What I mean by this is that the vaccine can be given to you at a spot. After 4 weeks, another dose will be given to you. And then starting from the last time you took it, after 4 weeks, another dose will be given. And by that, you'll be protected for like 10 to 15 years. That is the reality of it. That's only applicable to hepatitis B alone. Hepatitis C has no vaccine for now, but the good news is that it is 100% curable. Yeah, we have medications that can eradicate the hepatitis C from the human body. Now, for those that are living with hepatitis B, again, it is not a death sentence. If you are living with hepatitis B with adequate care, you can live a normal life. The reality is that you come to the lab, series of tests will be conducted on you to see the state of your liver, to see the fibrotic, state of the liver, to see how much the liver has been damaged. From there, from that clarity, medications will be given to you, and you live your normal life. But when you don't come for you don't come for screening and you are not aware that you have this disease, then it can degenerate to something else. And that will lead me to the complications of hepatitis B. The fact is that once the hepatitis B virus enters into your system, you don't feel any different than the little signs and symptoms you get when you have malaria typhoid, like the headache, like weak joint pain, weakness of the body, loss of appetite, and all that. These are the signs and symptoms you get during the acute phase of the disease. And then when we talk about the acute phase, it's just the persistence of the virus in the human body for like, 5 months. If the virus stays in your body for like 5 months, it is acute. But if it goes beyond 6 months, that's when we talk about the chronicity. So on the acute period, the signs and symptoms you get, they are like the typhoid, malaria you encounter. Now, if nothing is done, then during the acute phase, if you have a functional immune system, this virus can get out of your system. If you adopt a good detoxification system, if you adopt a good nutritional intake during the acute phase, the virus can get out of your system without taking any medication. But if you allow it to linger, if you allow it to persist, then it will transition to the chronic phase. In the chronic phase, man, your liver will start going bad. Remember, hepatitis is a silent killer. And why it is a silent killer is because the liver is a compensating organ. 70% of the hepatocytes or the liver cells can be damaged, yet you may not be aware of it. That is why it is a silent killer. Because 70% of the hepatocyte, the liver cells, can be damaged and you are still healthy, you are still looking healthy. So the liver is such an organ that can be burning and still keeping you warm. And that is why early diagnosis is very much high yield. So when you have when early detection diagnosis is very much important. Now, if nothing is done and 70% is damaged and you are still normal, and if nothing is done, it will keep increasing to about 75%. Once it gets to 75%, it becomes decompensated. Like I said, the liver is a compensating organ. It's one of the compensating organs. But a stage will come when it will become decompensated. You've heard of liver decompensated cirrhosis, you've heard of hepatocellular carcinoma, you've heard of stage 3 fibrosis. Now, if nothing is done during the acute phase, or even when you transition to the chronic phase and nothing is done to check the replication of the virus in your system, it can become chronic, and in that chronic state, it will become decompensated. When you get to the level of decompensation, there is nothing anybody can do again, unless we can call for liver transplantation. Apart from that, then the person is a candidate for the world beyond. That's the reality. So these are some of the complications you can get, right? Now, that being said, what again do you want me to speak to as far as hepatitis is concerned? Now, the floor now will be opened, for questions. If you have any question, if you want me to provide clarity to you in any aspect I have spoken about, then you can come forward for your questions and then we'll see how we'll address it. On this note, I want to say thank you for listening as I await your questions. Thank you.
Concern personally, I have somebody raised this issue during our parade. Last year, the team came here and administered the vaccine. Some of our colleagues there. They promised that they would come again, and we never saw them. Now, such vaccine was given to us once, and this is over a year. Does that still count in case you want to submit yourself for another uh, vaccination as it is now? Secondly, does it have any adverse effect? Since it's supposed to be within the interval of 4 weeks, and now we are counting so many weeks without the second and the third those things. Please help us so that we know how to make informed decision about ourselves.
Matter is that I talked to you about antibody threshold, right? The essence of the vaccine is for you to develop an antibody. With one injection, you can't develop enough antibody that can counter the virus. You have to take at least 2 times. Do you understand me? For you to have an appreciable antibody production that can counter the virus in your system. Do you understand me? So taking it once is as good as not taking it. Do you understand me? All right, as to the weather adverse effect and all that, I'm a public health officer and I'm equally a researcher. Sometimes there's a conflict between me because I know so much about vaccines, and as a public health officer, there are things we should just allow to be silent about. Do you understand me? But I would say that vaccine is safe and effective. Do you understand me? Vaccine is very safe and effective. You don't have any problem, especially adults. You can take the vaccine and protect yourself. That's the reality of it. There's actually no adverse effect except for children. Maybe after vaccination, they wind up with fever, like that. Apart from that, vaccine is safe and effective. Thank you, sir.
The notion that if you take it and discontinue, if you're not supposed to have hepatitis, you may end up having hepatitis.
No, it's not like that. Okay.
Well, my question is basically for mother and child.
Okay.
Because we know for every child at birth, they undergo immunization.
Yes.
How long does this immunization cover the child? Is it a lifetime thing or something you have to do after a period of time?
Okay, thank you, sir. So this antibody production, maximum 15 years is waned, like at birth. right? Once a child is given a vaccine at birth, after 15 years, you start again. You start another round of the vaccine. And if you're sometimes you go to the hospital, we check for the antibody level in your system. If the antibody is still very active, we only give you a booster dose. Do you understand me? We only give you a booster dose. But give or take from birth to 15 years, that antibody must have dropped. And if we check and you have an appreciable threshold of antibodies, we can just give you a booster dose thereafter. That one dose will take you for another 10 to 15 years.
Appreciate your while we were serving in plant commerce, we had a similar vaccine, three, just like you have advised that to take us for the required dosage. And then it was around 2010. They promised us, cover us for years, and here we are today. Would that one still be effective, or we might have had that and then we need to have another one?
Sorry, did you take the 3 course of the vaccine?
Yes, around
Then
2010.
it should still be effective. Yes, it should still be effective.
Please, I want to know the licensing effect or the signs that you get when you're having this sickness in you. Do you understand? There are the symptoms of it in your body.
All right, thank you, Ma. I think I said it already. The initial signs you get or symptoms you get is just like what you get when you are having malaria or typhoid. Maybe you don't eat very well, you don't sleep well, you have weakness, joint pains, and all that. That's the initial signs that people miss often. But when it gets to a certain, like the chronic phase of it, you start losing weight unnecessarily. You start having chronic pain, your chest, your hypochondrial areas start having a lot of pain. And then sleeplessness too, you will not be sleeping very well, pain and all that's the advanced stage of it. So at this stage, if you go to the hospital, you should be able to know what really is wrong with you. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. You said that two routes through which viruses and through which sickness like you mentioned one, you not say that one. If I
Okay, thank you.
number two, speaking of herbs, I don't know as a health worker, if you can advise us, how we take doses. This is not completely condemned. In the third question, the last question, if it's advised that when one wants to avoid like HIV, completely they say zip up and don't share sharp objects with other people and all that. Then for hepatitis, how do I avoid the viruses?
Thank you very much. So on the issue,
And I can't see for HIV. So you see for HIV.
okay, thank you very much. It shows that you have been listening very well, right? I said every disease in this world originates from two sources. That's what we call binary disease orthodoxy. And I said I proposed that theory. I proposed the theory. I've had conversation with a lot of people and they couldn't dispute it. That's the reality. Nobody could dispute it. That's how it is. Binary disease orthodoxy. If you want to know the two major causes of the disease or any disease you have, get this book and read. Now, hold on. No, hold on. Hold on. Knowledge. The reality of the matter is that people love certificates more than the knowledge. Do you believe that? That they can pay in the university, just give me the certificate, leave the knowledge. It's the certificate I want. Is it true? But the reality of the matter is that it is the knowledge that builds the certificate. beyond you having this book. It's a legacy you are leaving for your children to read. Do you know how it will be for a child to start having the understanding of disease, like 6 years, 7 years, start reading something? My daughter reads this. She's 7, and she can tell you about diseases. Do you understand me? Even if you don't have time to read it, buy it for your children. Let them read it and then gist with you, what it contains. Disease orthodoxy is 5,000. It's 5,000. Very small, but it is 5,000. It's 5,000. Disease, binary disease orthodoxy. Know it and you know peace. So that's one part of it, right? The other part is about the zip up, right? About the zip up is that the only way you can, okay, herbs, the reality of the matter is that you can't, as a researcher, I can't say any evil about herbs. That is a reality. We all take cocktails of fruit and veggies. When you say herbs, oftentimes people think it's the root and all that. That's what they think. But those that are familiar with hepatitis B, you take silimarin, right? Or you take all those drugs. They are cocktails of fruit and veggies, cocktails of vitamins and all that. Those vitamins, you can equally get them from your common vegetables around. Do you understand me? You get them from celery, you get them from beetroot, you get them. So on the issue of herbs, like cocktails of fruit and veggies, they are even very good. They can regenerate the liver. There are herbs that can actually regenerate the liver. The only problem we have with the herbs is the dosage. Anywhere you go, they will tell you the dosage is not well quantified and all that. And I told you that the thin line between pharmacology and toxicology is the dosage. Do you understand me? But if you take herbs, like wonderful herbal teas that can cleanse your system very well once in a while, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. So issue of zip up, take the vaccine. Like I said, the vaccine will protect you from getting the virus. Do you understand me? Yes. So that is it. Thank you, sir.
Say something that caught my attention, you are not clear on that, so I want to ask you to go and make me.
Okay, ma.
Because there was a time I went to my hospital, so I was trying to find out that how long does this last? He said 10 to 15 minutes. But when you go to hospital, you have to test and know if the vaccine is still active in your body.
Yes.
So now that you are here, you said it briefly, you didn't make it in a way that we understand. Some of us that have taken it before, how are you going to know the test?
Okay, thank you, ma. On the issue for like 10 to 15 years. After the 10 to 15 years, what we do, you go to the hospital, we do the hepatitis B surface antibody for you. If you have an appreciable antibody, right? All what we need to do is to give you one more shot as a booster dose. That shot will again take you for another 10 to 15 years.
That's what I'm asking.
Yes. Unless you come to the office. What we are doing here is just to check whether you have the virus or you don't have the virus. The antibody test, we are not running it here.